In the silent darkness of a moonless night at the Carter family farm, a heart-rending scream from the forest jolted Margaret and John awake in shock. The next morning, beneath the roots of an ancient pine, they discovered a tiny lynx kitten, soaked, trembling, and barely clinging to life. But the true miracle was not only the emergency rescue that followed, but the appearance of Daisy, a domestic cat who had recently suffered the loss of her own kitten and instinctively stepped forward to protect this fragile wild creature.
It's okay,
What
sweetie. We're
happened next
almost
defied the
finished
laws of
here.
nature, as a sacred bond began to
being so
form between two
brave.
animals from completely different worlds. Why would a domesticated cat become a mother to a fierce creature of the wild? And what secret lay behind the gentle purring that soothed their shared pain? This story will completely change everything you thought you knew about the boundaries of love and the ancient instinct of motherhood. Before you begin this deeply moving journey of healing and rebirth, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any more miraculous stories from the animal world. The primordial scream tore through the stillness of the deep woods, a jagged rip in the velvet fabric of the night. It wasn't the shriek of a barn owl, nor the mournful howl of a lone coyote. And this was a guttural, heart-wrenching sound, thick with a terror so profound it seemed to vibrate the very foundations of the old Carter farmhouse. It slammed into Margaret and John, jolting them awake in the abrupt, breathless way only true alarm can. Margaret's hand shot to John's arm, her grip tight, her eyes wide with a question she didn't dare voice. The cry echoed, fading into a mournful wail, and then silence. A silence far heavier and more foreboding than the sound itself. It clung to the air, an unseen presence of suffering that raised goosebumps on Margaret's arms, despite the warmth of their flannel sheets. John pushed himself up, leaning on an elbow, listening, his brow furrowed. The sound had been utterly alien, yet undeniably a plea. An unknown tragedy was unfolding just beyond their doorstep, leaving them restless and filled with a dreadful sense of impotent dread. For Daisy, the pampered house cat, the world had exploded into a chaotic symphony of fear. One moment, she was dreaming of chasing sunbeams across the living room rug. The next, a cacophony of panicked meows and overwhelming scent of something wild and desperate filled the air. She was tiny, a wisp of calico fur, and the sheer force of the sound had sent her scrambling under the bed, every fiber of her being vibrating with an instinctual dread she couldn't comprehend. Her ears flattened against her head, her whiskers twitching erratically as the vibrations of large human feet thumped above her. Then came the soft murmurs, the quiet, concerned voices of her giants, Margaret and John. They were usually a source of soft pets and delicious tuna, but tonight even their voices were tinged with a strange anxiety. Hours later, as the first tendrils of dawn bleached the eastern sky, another sound cut through the pre-dawn quiet. Not a scream, but a whimpering, weak and broken. It was closer now, just outside the tree line, a small, piteous sound that tugged at something deep within Margaret. She pulled on her gardening boots and a thick jacket, grabbing a powerful flashlight John kept by the back door. John followed, a heavy blanket draped over his arm, his face grim. The air was crisp, biting with the promise of a cold morning, and the forest loomed, dark and secretive. Daisy, drawn by an irresistible, dangerous curiosity, slipped out the pet door, a tiny shadow clinging to the periphery of the giant's expedition. The smell of fear was thick, an animal smell, alien and powerful, mixing with the damp earth and pine. The giants found the source of the whimpering quickly. A small, bedraggled creature, barely larger than Daisy, huddled at the base of a massive pine. Its fur was wet and matted, one tiny ear slightly torn. It was a kitten, but not a house cat. This was wild, fierce, even in its profound weakness. A lynx kitten. Daisy froze, every instinct screaming, predator, danger, yet something else warred within her. The kitten's cry, high-pitched and fragile, resonated with a deep maternal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. She watched from the shadows as John knelt, slowly, carefully extending the blanket. The lynx kitten hissed, a tiny defiant sound, but it was weak. Its body trembled with cold and fear. The giants were slow, their movements ponderous but deliberate. The large, warm hand, smelling of wood smoke, and something sweet wrapped the blanket around her. She struggled, claws flailing, but her strength was a mere flicker. A sharp, stinging sensation briefly pierced her flank. A quick, unexpected pinch, then a rush of warmth, a strange, floaty feeling. The world started to blur around the edges. She heard the soft, rumbling voices of the giants, felt the gentle rocking motion as she was lifted, cradled against a warm chest. She wanted to fight, to run, but exhaustion, cold and a strange new calm, like a heavy fog, pulled her down. Her little body sagged. When she awoke, the world was different. No cold earth, no biting wind. Instead, warmth, a soft, unfamiliar warmth from above, and the softest bedding beneath her. A strange, clean smell, not of pine and wet earth, but of something clinical, something safe. Her body ached, but the frantic, terrifying hunger that had gnawed at her for days was gone. She lifted her head, her nose twitching. Nearby, a small dish of water shimmered invitingly, and beside it, a glorious scent. Meat. Real meat. She hadn't known such luxury existed. The giants were there. Though unseen, their murmurs a constant, reassuring hum. They were so large, their forms looming, but their hands, when they appeared, were gentle. One day, a giant hand, the female one, dipped a finger into the meat and brought it to her nose. Fear flared, but hunger won. The taste was exquisite, a burst of energy, a promise of life. She didn't know her mother was gone. Didn't know the raw, guttural cry that had pierced the night was her mother's desperate, final warning as a car, silent and deadly, had struck her down. She just knew hunger, and then this strange, encompassing warmth. Daisy, the calico, watched from outside the enclosure, her green eyes fixed on the small sleeping form. An instinct, ancient and deep, stirred within her. The tiny lynx kitten was alone, and in the quiet hum of the house, a different kind of trust, fragile and new, began to tentatively unfurl. The first sliver of dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised purples and grays. Not yet a promise of warmth, but a whisper of its coming. Inside the old farmhouse, a different kind of vigil had been underway for hours. Daisy, the usually aloof house cat, had been a statue on the back porch, her black fur a deeper shadow against the pre-dawn gloom. Her ears, typically twitching at every rustle, were pinned, her gaze unwavering. Margaret, an early riser by habit and a light sleeper by nature, felt the subtle shift in the house's rhythm. Something was off. She padded barefoot to the back door, the floorboards cool beneath her feet. Daisy didn't turn, didn't offer her usual morning headbutt against Margaret's shins. Instead, a low, guttural rumble vibrated from her chest. Not a purr, not a growl, but something in between. A sound Margaret hadn't heard since Daisy had lost her own litter of kittens months ago. Then Margaret saw it, nestled precariously against Daisy's flank, almost swallowed by the larger cat's protective bulk, was a tiny shivering mound of matted sandy brown fur. It was barely bigger than a large grapefruit, its breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. A lynx kit. Its eyes, still clouded with the opaque film of extreme youth, seemed to plead with the world. A dark, jagged gash ran across its tiny right paw, seeping a sluggish, dark stain onto the cold concrete. Daisy, her whole body taut with an almost frantic intensity, was licking the kit's head, nudging it gently with her nose. It was a fierce, primal mothering, a raw display of instinct stripped bare. Margaret's breath hitched. The image of Daisy's own stillborn litter, buried beneath the old oak, flashed through her mind. A cold echo of loss that now found an unexpected, heartbreaking parallel in this fragile, wild creature. The kit, too weak to recoil, shivered violently under Daisy's ministrations. The warmth of the house cat was a small comfort against the encroaching chill of the morning, but the overwhelming sensation was pain. A dull throb pulsed from its paw, radiating up its tiny leg. Every breath was a struggle, a tiny puff of condensation in the cold air. The world felt vast and menacing, a kaleidoscope of towering shadows and strange booming sounds. There was no familiar scent, No comforting presence of its own kind, only the strange, warm weight of the black creature next to it, and a new, larger shadow looming overhead. Margaret knelt, slowly, her movements deliberate, speaking in a low, soothing tone. "Oh, you poor baby. Daisy! Oh, Daisy!" The house cat let out another rumbling sound, a warning, her body tensing. But the kit was slipping away. It needed help, and fast. The kit registered the giant's approach as a dizzying shift in the air pressure, a new, unfamiliar scent invading its already overloaded senses. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through the haze of pain. It tried to squirm, to burrow deeper into the black cat's fur, but its strength was gone. Its world was a jumble of soft warmth and sharp stings, of distant roars and close, anxious whispers. Then the giant's hand, impossibly large, moved towards it. Instinct screamed danger, but there was no energy left for escape, only a faint whimpering sound deep in its throat. The sting was sharp, a brief fiery jab that made the kit yelp. Then another strange sensation. Warmth, not the soft, enveloping warmth of the black cat, but a controlled, steady heat that seeped into its aching bones. The roar of the giant's voice was different now, softer, the sounds rhythmic and soothing. Its body, so recently a vessel of pain and exhaustion, was being handled with an unfamiliar gentleness. The fear was still there, a tight knot in its belly, but it was slowly being eclipsed by the encroaching wave of a deep, drug-induced sleep. It drifted, suspended between the sharp memory of hunger and the dull ache of the wound, and the new confusing comfort of being held. When it next awoke, the pain was muted, a distant echo rather than a piercing shriek. A new smell filled its nostrils, antiseptic, mingled with something sweet and metallic. It was lying on something soft, incredibly soft, and a dull, comforting thrum vibrated through the air. The black cat, curled tightly beside its makeshift nest, eyes now closed in sleep. A small, shallow dish of cool water was nearby. The memory of thirst, so long a constant companion, was almost overwhelming. It nudged its tiny nose towards the water, lapping tentatively. The liquid was cool and clean, a miracle against its parched throat. The towering giants, Margaret and her husband David, moved around its new den. Their voices, once terrifyingly loud, now seemed gentler, softer, almost like the rustle of leaves. Their immense hands, once threatening, now brought sustenance. Tiny bits of wet, palatable food, pressed against its mouth with a soft finger. The sting of the needle was a fading memory, replaced by the warmth of a blanket. The subtle thrum of a heating pad, the quiet, reassuring presence of the black cat. The world was still a strange, confusing place, but the sharp edges of fear were beginning to blur. Trust, a delicate, fragile bud, was beginning to unfurl in the vast, wild landscape of its small, recovering heart. Is a desperate mother watching from the shadows, or is it just the wild's unforgiving gaze? The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, held an invisible tension that vibrated through Daisy's whiskers. The small lynx, a bundle of raw pain and confusion, had been placed gently on a soft, worn blanket inside the sunroom, a space usually reserved for Daisy's languid naps. To the lynx kit, every movement of the giant human, John, was a looming shadow. Every soft murmur, a rumbling growl from an unknown predator. Its world had shrunk to a searing ache in its leg, and the overwhelming stench of strange fur. Daisy's clean and domestic, but alien nonetheless. Daisy, usually indifferent to anything beyond her food bowl and the warmest patch of sun, was a coiled spring. Her ears, usually laid back in blissful slumber, swiveled independently, catching every rustle from the dense woods that bordered the property. A distant bird alarm, sharp and sudden, made her twitch, a low rumble vibrating in her chest. She knew. She could feel the wild mother's presence, a spectral shadow weaving through the trees, and a silent scream of maternal agony echoing just beyond human hearing. It was a tension that felt like a predator's breath on the back of the neck, unseen but undeniably there. John, his face etched with a grim determination, knelt beside the small creature. To the kit, John was a giant, his hands immense, his scent a mix of human and something metallic that made its nose wrinkle. A cool, gentle touch prodded its injured leg, sending a fresh wave of agony through its small frame. The kit's instinctive response was a weak snarl, a desperate, futile attempt to ward off the encroaching pain, its tiny claws trying to bat away the intrusive fingers. John's touch, despite its initial discomfort, was methodical. He gently, expertly palpated the swollen limb. His breath hitched slightly. "Compound fracture, likely," he murmured to himself, his voice a low rumble that made the kit flinch. "And the dehydration, critical." He noted the kit's sunken eyes, the lethargy that spoke volumes of days without water. Days of agonizing pain. The human giant's voice held a strange kind of sadness, a sorrow the kit couldn't comprehend, but somehow felt in the vibrations through the blanket. A sting, sharp and fleeting, on its flank was followed by the strange sensation of liquid being pushed into its tiny body. It was an odd feeling, a cool flow. Not water, but something else, something that slowly, imperceptibly, began to lessen the dry scratch in its throat. The day wore on, each passing hour a slow, measured beat against the backdrop of rustling leaves and distant calls. The kit, exhausted by pain and fear, drifted in and out of a fitful sleep. Each time it woke, the giant human was still there. Not menacing, but a constant presence. A new scent permeated the air, something warm and meaty, placed in a shallow dish near its nose. It was a struggle to lift its head, but the smell was intoxicating, a memory of a hunt that ended in loss. Tentatively, its tongue flicked out, tasting the soft, unfamiliar food. It was bland, not the rich, warm taste of fresh kill, but it was sustenance. The dryness in its mouth lessened with each small, hesitant lick. The taste of clean, cool water, offered in a tiny dish, was a revelation, a balm to its parched throat, washing away the grit of days of thirst. Daisy continued her silent vigil. Her gaze was fixed on the tree line, her muscles taut. John, aware of the unspoken communication between his domestic companion and the wild, felt a chill creep up his spine. He knew the lynx mother was out there. He could almost feel her desperate, hungry eyes on the sunroom, on her stolen child. The rustling of leaves no longer seemed random. The bird alarms no longer mere background noise. They were signals, a dialogue of the wild, confirming an unseen, watchful presence. The kit, drowsy from the pain medication, found a strange comfort in the soft blanket, its tiny body sinking into the warmth. The pain was still there, a dull throb instead of a searing fire, but it was no longer alone. The human giants, for all their intimidating size, had offered something new: relief. The fear was slowly, incrementally, being replaced by a fragile new sensation: trust. The world outside, though still full of shadows, no longer felt entirely hostile. The world was a confusing blur of smells and rough textures, none of them familiar, all of them terrifying. A searing pain in his flank pulsed with every shallow breath. The low, rumbling growl that usually meant comfort was gone, replaced by the frantic beating of his own tiny heart against his ribs. He wanted his mother. He wanted the familiar scent of pine needles and damp earth. All he knew was a cold, encroaching darkness, punctuated by unfamiliar, massive shadows that moved with unnerving speed. The giant hands, far too large and utterly alien, had lifted him from the damp earth. His mother's scent, a powerful anchor in his tiny universe, had receded, replaced by something warm and synthetic, yet strangely comforting, like a hollow log on a cold night. He registered the sudden warmth of a soft blanket, the gentle rumble of a voice, deep and resonant, that didn't feel like a threat. The overwhelming scent of fear, his own, and something else, something wild and unseen, was slowly being replaced by the sterile smell of antiseptic and a faint, sweet tang. He tried to open his eyes, but the effort was too much. His world remained a dark, throbbing canvas of pain. He heard a soft clinking sound, then a sudden, sharp sting on his side. He flinched, a tiny involuntary tremor shaking his small body, but the hand that held him remained steady, surprisingly gentle. A new sensation, not pain, but a cool, wet touch was applied to his wound. It stung for a moment, then a strange, numbing relief spread, dulling the sharp edge of his discomfort. He whimpered, a tiny sound lost in the vastness of this new environment. Another large hand, this one with a different, softer touch, stroked his head, the pads of the fingers surprisingly gentle against his sensitive fur. It felt like the lick of his mother's tongue, a soothing, rhythmic pressure that slowly, almost imperceptibly, lulled him towards a state of tentative rest. He felt himself being lifted again, then placed into a different kind of warmth. Not the rough warmth of his mother's body, but an even encompassing heat that seeped into his chilled bones. It felt safe for now. He was drifting, suspended between the pain that had been his constant companion and this new, uncertain comfort. The gentle thrum of the new warmth around him was a steady presence. He felt a soft, rhythmic movement, like a heartbeat beneath him. The air here was different, too. Not the wild tang of the forest, but a clean, almost antiseptic smell, mingled with something else, something warm and sweet. He could hear faint whispers, the low cadence of human voices, which no longer sounded quite so menacing. They were close, always close, but they hadn't hurt him again. The sting had been brief, the warmth was prolonged. It was a trade-off his instinct could understand, a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness. A new sensation, a tiny drop of moisture on his tongue. It was cool, tasteless, but incredibly welcome. His throat, raw and parched, instinctively swallowed. Then another drop, and another. It wasn't the rich milk of his mother, but it was enough to soothe the fire in his throat. He felt the soft pressure of a human finger against his chin, tilting his head slightly. The world was still mostly dark, but a faint, diffuse glow began to penetrate his closed eyelids. He was still hurting, yes, but the pain had dulled, becoming a distant throb rather than a searing fire. The smell of the forest, the fear of the open, had retreated, replaced by the soft warmth and the steady presence of these gentle giants. He was no longer entirely alone in his fight. Against all odds, a tiny heart fought to beat. Could human care, so foreign and overwhelming, be enough to coax life back into such a fragile form? The first 24 hours were a blur of frantic activity, seen through the hazy lens of pain and exhaustion. For the tiny lynx kit, the world was a cacophony of new bewildering sensations. Giants moved around, their voices deep rumblings, their shadows vast. There was a metallic tang in the air, a sterile scent that was nothing like the damp earth or the scent of pine. A dull ache throbbed through its small body, a constant reminder of the sharp, burning cold that had preceded this strange new warmth. One of the giants, the one with the deeper voice, moved with a surprising gentleness. A sudden, sharp prick on its side, a moment of intense, confusing pain, made the kit flinch, a tiny mule escaping its throat. But then a warmth spread through its veins, a subtle easing of the cold that had permeated its bones. It was a strange, almost miraculous sensation, the sting bringing relief. John, leveraging his old rescue training, administered fluids with a tiny syringe, his brow furrowed with concentration. Each drop was a victory, a defiant stand against the encroaching shadow. Meanwhile, the other giant, the one with the softer voice, moved with a quiet efficiency. Her large, warm hands, initially startling, now felt less threatening. They seemed to possess a magical ability to bring comfort, gently adjusting a soft blanket around its shivering form. Margaret meticulously monitored the kit's temperature, her fingers brushing against its clammy fur, feeling for any sign of change. And then there was the smaller creature, the one with the purr. Daisy, the domestic cat, remained a constant, comforting presence. Her rumbling vibrations, a deep, rhythmic thrumming, penetrated the kit's fog of pain and fear. It was a familiar sound, a mother sound, even if this mother smelled different, smaller, and had no spots. Daisy, curled softly beside the incubator, seemed to project a quiet strength, a silent promise that things would be okay. The kit, too weak to respond, found a strange solace in her unwavering presence. The kid endured a harrowing night. Each breath was a struggle, a tiny whisper against the vast silence of the room. Its breathing occasionally faltered, creating moments of acute fear for the giants. It felt like sinking, a dizzying drop into a cold, dark well, only to be pulled back by another surge of warmth. Another gentle adjustment of the blanket, another soft murmur from the female giant. The air was thick with tension, palpable even to its dulled senses. It was a delicate dance between life and death, where every tiny breath was a victory, every faint heartbeat a declaration of defiance. The memory of the harsh cold, the gnawing hunger, the terrifying solitude of the wilderness. These memories flickered at the edge of its awareness, sharp contrast to the bewildering, overwhelming care it now received. It learned slowly that the prodding fingers were not meant to harm, that the strange liquids brought a fleeting relief, and that the deep voices, though unsettling, carried no malice. As the hours bled into the next day, a flicker of something new began to stir within the kit. Not strength, not yet, but a faint, burgeoning sense of safety. The persistent warmth, the clean taste of the tiny sips of water, the continuous presence of the purring cat, these were building blocks, slowly, painstakingly. It was a world turned upside down, where pain was followed by relief, fear by a strange, new comfort. The giants were no longer just looming shadows, but sources of gentle prodding and soft warmth. The world had been a jumble of crushing weight and sharp, biting pain, followed by a dizzying, suffocating emptiness. Then, a slow, insistent warmth began to seep into the hollow places, chasing away the cold dread that had clung to the lynx kit's small, shivering body for what felt like an eternity. It was a faint whisper of relief, a fragile tendril of sensation that, against all odds, offered a tiny flicker of hope. Through the haze of exhaustion and lingering discomfort, a new rhythm asserted itself, a steady beat that wasn't its own, but a deep, reassuring thrumming beneath its tiny paws. The frantic, searing agony in its leg had dulled to a persistent ache, a dull echo of the sharp, burning sensation that had preceded it. There had been giants, looming forms that smelled of strange, sharp things and soft, comforting things. Their hands had been immense, engulfing, but surprisingly gentle. A sharp prick, then a wave of wooziness, followed by this heavy, dreamless sleep. Now the weight of the soft, fluffy world around it was less crushing, more embracing. Its eyelids, crusted and heavy, twitched. The internal thrum grew stronger, and with it, a primal urge to see, to orient itself. With a monumental effort, a shuddering breath that felt like it ripped through its very core, the lynx kit pushed, and a sliver of the bright world broke through. Then another. Deep pools of cautious, wary blue stared out, unfocused but undeniably open. The giants were still there, their low voices a comforting rumble, but they seemed less threatening now, their presence a soft blanket against the lingering chill of fear. A new scent drifted in, warm and familiar, a comforting animal smell that wasn't quite its own, but close enough. It was a purring, soft presence that settled nearby, radiating a gentle heat. The smaller giant, a shadow form that moved with fluid grace, nudged against its flank. Not with the overwhelming force of the bipedal giants, but with a light, insistent pressure. The lynx kit's body, still stiff and sore, registered the contact. It was unexpected, yet not unwelcome. The initial impulse to lash out, to defend its meager space, was muted by the overwhelming lethargy and a new tentative curiosity. The world had shifted from a place of relentless danger to one of strange, careful observation. The constant ache in its leg was still there, a dull throb, but it was overshadowed by the steady, rhythmic touch of this new furred presence. A small, weak twitch rippled through the lynx kit's shoulder in response, a subtle acknowledgement. The world was starting to make a tiny bit of sense. The taste of clean, cool water offered from a strange, shallow dish by a towering, soft-spoken giant had been a revelation. For days, thirst had been a gnawing demon, a constant companion. Now each tiny lick was a wave of pure, exquisite relief, washing away the gritty dryness in its mouth. Then came the soft, mushy food, pressed gently to its lips. It was alien, unfamiliar, but surprisingly palatable. The instinct to reject it, to spit out anything not hunted or caught, was overridden by the insistent hunger that had been dormant for too long. The sensation of nourishment, however minimal, sparked a tiny, almost imperceptible surge of energy. This was a different kind of survival, one that involved trust in these strange, enormous creatures who, despite their terrifying size, offered warmth, water, and food without threat. The fear began to recede, replaced by a tentative, nascent acceptance. The small, soft things arrived next, pushed towards it by the smaller, furry giant. They smelled faintly of catnip and home, not the wild, sharp sense of the forest, but a new, comforting blend. They were harmless, yielding to the faintest bat of a paw, easy to roll and bat at without pain. The sheer novelty of it, after days of agonizing pain and fear, was almost overwhelming. This tiny, familiar play, this gentle interaction with something that didn't threaten or demand, began to awaken a forgotten part of the lynx kit. Its body was still weak, its leg a tender burden, but the act of batting at a tiny, fluffy mouse brought a ripple of something akin to contentment. The lingering echoes of its past, of the biting cold and the gnawing hunger, were still there, but they were being slowly, gently overwritten by the warmth of touch, the taste of sustenance, and the unexpected, silent companionship of a small, fluffy guardian. The giants, too, observed with quiet joy, their immense hands now only reaching out for soft, reassuring strokes. This fragile truce, this tiny sprout of trust, was a miracle in the making. The cold bite of the early morning air was a familiar ache, but today it carried a different kind of chill. Daisy, the old house cat, felt it first, a prickle of ancient instinct that raised the fine hairs on her spine even through the warmth of her perch on the windowsill. The scent was there, faint but undeniable, carried on a gust from the dense pines that bordered their property. It was the scent of wildness, of predator, and it was closer than it had ever been. John, coffee mug forgotten in his hand, stared down at the damp earth, a knot tightening in his stomach. The prints weren't just fresh, they were bold, etched with an almost defiant clarity just beyond the porch steps. This wasn't a casual wanderer. This was deliberate. He knew what these meant, the message they carried in their silent imprint. The wild mother was watching. She had been watching for days, perhaps weeks, a phantom presence in the periphery of their lives, and now she was making herself known. Daisy, sensing his unease, rubbed against his leg, a soft rumbling purr, a stark contrast to the thumping dread in his chest. The little lynx kit, whom they had named Shadow, was growing, shedding the last vestiges of its fear-born skittishness. His fur, a beautiful tawny speckled with darker spots, was thickening, no longer matted with the grime of the wilderness, but sleek and vibrant. He learned to trust the towering humans, their hands no longer instruments of capture, but of comfort. The first days had been a blur of terror for Shadow. The giant hands had scooped him from his familiar, if desperate, world. The sharp, unfamiliar sting of a needle had brought a moment of intense panic, a desperate squirm against the confines of the soft blanket they'd wrapped him in. But then had come the warmth, the gentle rocking, the sweet taste of milk from a syringe, and the profound relief of a full, warm belly after days of aching emptiness. The soft, rhythmic pulsing of the older, smaller feline, Daisy against his side in the large, soft bed, became a surprising source of comfort. Daisy's constant, quiet presence was a balm, an anchor in this strange new world. But today the air held a new tension, a subtle shift in the human's demeanor that even Shadow, still so young, could feel. He watched John pace, the giant's scent growing sharper with worry. Shadow understood little of their complex emotions, only that the usual calm in the house had been disrupted. He instinctively sought out Daisy, burying his nose in her soft fur, drawing comfort from her steady purr. The world outside, the world of trees and shadows and a mother's fierce protective love, was a fading memory, replaced by the soft blankets and gentle hands of his rescuers. Yet some deep primal part of him, in an echo of his wild heritage, still felt the pull of the unknown. The discovery of the tracks had settled a cold, hard fact in John's mind. This wasn't just about saving a lost kid anymore. It was about a negotiation with the wild. Every day, Shadow grew stronger, more reliant on their care, further complicating the precarious balance. He looked at the dense tree line, a dark, impenetrable wall against the pale morning sky, knowing that somewhere within it, a mother lynx watched. He imagined her gaunt and restless, her instincts warring with the undeniable truth of her kit's safety, however temporary. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a cage, a temporary holding place for a stolen piece of the wilderness. The lynx mother, out there in the shadowy woods, was a tangible threat, a force of nature driven by instinct and loss. They were holding her child, albeit for his own good, and that truth hummed with danger. The air around the house felt charged, thick with unspoken questions and the silent, watchful gaze of a wild mother. Daisy, ever vigilant, rose from her nap, stretching luxuriously before walking over to the window. Her gaze, ancient and knowing, settled on the same tree line John had been staring at. A low rumble started in her chest, not quite a purr, not quite a growl, a sound of old instinct stirring, a recognition of the wildness that now pressed so close to their human-tamed world. The conflict, once internal, was now undeniably external, its shadow cast long over their little haven. Two mothers, one wild, one tame, stood on opposite sides of a window. What words were unspoken? The air inside the cabin, usually a symphony of gentle purrs and human murmurs, held a new kind of tension, thick and expectant. Little Lynx, still too small for a name beyond the whispered endearment of Kit, was nestled in the incubator, a tiny engine of life, healing. He remembered the cold, the biting emptiness, the terror of being alone. Then came the giant hands, terrifying at first, but surprisingly gentle. A sharp prick, then a wave of warmth, a softness he hadn't known since his mother's fur. The taste of milk, warm and sweet, after an eternity of thirst, was a miracle. He felt a dull ache in his leg, a constant reminder of the fall. But it was a muted ache now, not the searing agony it had once been. The giants were strange, their voices rumbling, but their touch was undeniably kind. On the second night, a shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness beyond the cabin's clearing. It moved with a silent, predatory grace that spoke of ancient instincts and a wild heart. The lynx mother appeared at the window, a spectral presence in the moonlight. Her eyes, those twin pools of fierce, untamed gold, found him instantly, a tiny, vulnerable shape within the glass confines. He felt a primal tug, a forgotten warmth, a scent that was both familiar and terrifyingly distant. Daisy, perched on a stool beside the incubator, hadn't stirred. Her own gaze, calm and steady, met the wild mother's across the pane of glass. It wasn't a challenge. It was an acknowledgement, a profound, wordless understanding passing between two beings, bound by the fierce, unyielding devotion of motherhood. Margaret, observing from the shadows of the living room, held her breath, captivated. The air crackled with a silent, intense communication, a raw, primal language spoken only between mothers. Was the wild mother recognizing an ally, or plotting a rescue of her own? The raw emotions palpable across the pane of glass? Little Lynx inside the incubator felt the tremor of the air, the scent of wildness that clung to the outside world. He twitched, a tiny rumble building in his throat, a mix of fear and an incomprehensible longing. His small bandaged leg throbbed gently, a dull, reassuring ache that told him he was alive, that he was being cared for. The giants, initially so terrifying in their looming presence, had become sources of soft hands, warm milk, and the comforting rumble of their voices. He remembered the fear of the open sky, the biting wind, the helplessness. Now he was safe, cocooned in warmth, his little heart beating a steady rhythm of recovery. He had known pain, hunger, and the crushing weight of loneliness. Now he knew the soft brush of Daisy's fur against the incubator glass, the gentle murmurs of the giants, the miraculous warmth that seeped into his tiny, aching bones. Margaret watched the tableau, her heart a drumbeat against her ribs. She saw the unwavering intensity in the lynx mother's gaze, the sheer force of maternal love radiating across the divide. And then she saw Daisy, a domestic cat, meeting that wild gaze with an equal, unwavering intensity, a silent pact being forged in the still of the night. It was more than just observation. It was a profound, almost spiritual connection, a testament to the universal language of motherhood. The raw emotions, the primal instincts, were laid bare, crossing species, crossing the boundary between wild and tame. Margaret, usually so pragmatic, found herself utterly spellbound by the unspoken drama unfolding before her. The lynx mother lingered, her wild eyes never leaving the little kit. He felt her presence, a faint, lingering scent that spoke of pine needles and damp earth. It was a comforting scent, yet also a reminder of the harsh world he had fallen from, a world he was now being rehabilitated to re-enter. The humans, the giants, were mending him, preparing him for that return. He understood in his tiny developing brain that this temporary comfort was a bridge, not a permanent home. He purred, a tiny, reedy sound, a testament to the warmth, the safety, the slow, steady return of strength. The silent standoff continued, a powerful, unspoken dialogue of hope and fierce protection. A mother's heart, Daisy knew, was capable of the hardest choices. To let go. The thought, a heavy, silent weight, settled over the little domestic feline as the days stretched into a week, each one bringing new strength to the small, wild creature she had claimed as her own. Kit, the Bobcat Kitten, was thriving. His small body, once a bundle of cold fear and pain, now radiated a vibrant energy. The gentle giants, John and Margaret, continued their meticulous care, but their movements now carried a subtle shift, a quiet preparation. Daisy felt it in the air, a scent of impending change, sharp and bittersweet. The soft, regular rhythm of Kit's breathing beside her, once a constant comfort, now seemed like a ticking clock. The first step was the enclosure, a large mesh-covered structure, smelling of fresh wood in the open air, was erected in the backyard. Kit, initially bewildered, explored it with a cautious curiosity that quickly morphed into adventurous play. He would stalk imaginary prey in the tall grass planted inside, his small tufted ears swiveling to catch every rustle. Daisy would sit outside the mesh, watching, a soft purr rumbling in her chest. But it was a purr laced with a new kind of anxiety. Her bright, intelligent eyes, usually so full of contentment, now held a visible distress. Her once joyful, trilling meows, greeting Kit's every playful pounce, turned into soft, mournful cries that tugged at John and Margaret's hearts. The humans, those immense, soft-spoken beings who had brought warmth and nourishment, were also grappling with the emotional weight. Daisy sensed their quiet conversations, their lingering touches on Kit's head. They spoke in hushed tones of reintroduction in the wild, words that, to Daisy, meant only one thing: separation. She remembered the terror of the first moments, the dizzying confusion of being scooped from the cold, the strange, metallic smell of the vehicle. But that terror had given way to the soft embrace of John's shirt, the rhythmic purr of her own mother's chest, and later, the comforting pressure of a tiny, purring bobcat Kit against her side. The transition was gradual, meant to ease Kit back into his natural instincts. Freshly killed prey, small rodents that made Daisy's stomach clench with a primal aversion, were left in the enclosure. Kit, at first hesitant, his instincts still muted by the comfort of human-provided food, slowly began to respond. He would bat at them, then stalk, then with a swift, brutal efficiency, claim them. Daisy watched, her ears flattened slightly. This was not her kit, not the soft, purring bundle that had snuggled into her side. This was something wild, something untamed, awakening. The humans, too, seemed to be preparing themselves for a goodbye. Margaret would often sit by the enclosure, talking softly to Kit, her voice thick with emotion. John would run his hand through Kit's fur, a gesture of affection that was slowly becoming a farewell. Daisy would rub against their legs, weaving between them, trying to infuse her own comfort, her own plea for things to remain as they were. The purrs that vibrated through her small body were no longer entirely joyful. They were an insistent, desperate plea for continuity. She knew what it meant, this careful distance, this slow unraveling of their intimate family unit. The bond, forged in fear and nurtured by trust, was now undergoing its ultimate test. It was a testament to the depth of their connection, a quiet, heartbreaking affirmation of love's most difficult choice. To rescue meant to give a future, even if that future was away from them. And a mother's heart, Daisy was learning, sometimes had to break so that her child could truly fly. The air was different, electric with an unfamiliar anticipation. It hummed in Daisy's whiskers, a vibration that settled deep in her bones. This giant, the one whose touch had so often meant warmth and soft blankets, and the gentle pressure of fingers behind her ears, moved with a different kind of purpose today. It wasn't the urgency of a frantic search, nor the quiet deliberation of meal prep. It was a leading, a gentle nudge towards the threshold of their shared haven. The little lynx, no longer a kit in the same fragile sense, matched Daisy's stride. His reddish-brown fur, once patchy and dull, now gleamed, thick and healthy. His tufted ears, so often flattened in fear during those first terrifying days, were perked, constantly sampling the scents that drifted from the trees. He remembered the sharp, biting pain of a needle, the odd, metallic taste of medicine forced down his throat. But those memories were now softened by the lingering warmth of Daisy's fur, the rhythmic purr that had been his lullaby. He remembered the terror of being alone, the gnawing ache in his belly, the biting cold, and then the hands. Gigantic. Initially terrifying, yet always eventually bringing relief. The cool water lapped at his parched tongue, the soft, shredded meat so easily swallowed, the sting of antiseptic on a wound, followed by the comforting pressure of a bandage. It was a cycle of strange events, each ending in a measure of peace he hadn't known before. The giants, initially perceived as predators, had become providers. Daisy guided him through the familiar yard, past the worn porch steps, and towards the edge of the true wild. The one Daisy sometimes ventured into, but always returned from. A different kind of scent now hit the lynx, wilder, untamed, full of possibilities. His muscles tensed, not with fear, but with a burgeoning instinct, a memory stirring from before the dark times. The giants had taught him how to eat, how to drink, how to rest without fear of immediate peril. They had fixed his body, but they had not erased the call of the forest, the deep-seated knowledge of his own kind. He glanced at Daisy, who rubbed against his leg, a familiar comfort. Her low rumble, usually so soothing, now carried a note of bitter, sweet farewell. And then she appeared, a shadow emerging from the deeper greens and browns of the forest, silent, powerful, immense. Her coat was a dappled canvas of tawny and gray, perfectly blending with the shadows. The air grew still, heavy with her presence. Daisy froze, her tail flicking once, almost imperceptibly, a recognition of something ancient and unchallengeable. The lynx kit, too, stopped, his small body quivering with an instinctual deference. This was not a giant of the house. This was a giant of the trees, of the hunt, of his own lineage. A primal recognition sparked within him, a silent roar of belonging. The wild mother approached, her movements fluid and utterly silent. Her gaze swept over the smaller lynx, a thorough inspection that conveyed both fierce proprietorship and a profound, wordless relief. Then in a moment that caused Daisy's fur to prickle, and the human giant holding the camera to gasp. The powerful lynx turned her head toward Daisy. Slowly, deliberately, the wild mother lowered her head, extending her muzzle. Daisy, her instincts screaming a mix of caution and something akin to awe, reciprocated, touching her own delicate nose to the rough, powerful muzzle of the wild cat. It was a fleeting, impossibly tender gesture, a brush of fur, a sharing of breath, a silent acknowledgement of the impossible bridge built between their worlds. A mother's thanks, a protector's trust, a blessing whispered on the wind. Then the wild mother nudged her healthy kit, a silent command, and the two disappeared back into the embracing green, swallowed by the forest from which they came, leaving only the scent of pine and wildness in their wake. What enduring lessons did two mothers, one wild, one tame, teach humanity? The question hung in the quiet air of the afternoon, a profound resonance long after the last rustle of leaves had faded. The family, huddled by the window, watched in silent awe as the adult lynx, a shadow of wild grace, led her kit, a tiny tentative echo of her own strength, deeper into the forest. Each movement was a testament to instinct, to survival, to a fierce, protective love that transcended the human understanding of boundaries. They vanished, and not with a dramatic flourish, but with the quiet dignity of creatures returning to their rightful place. An atmosphere of peace, profound and almost sacred, settled over the cabin. Daisy, usually a whirlwind of restless curiosity, sat by the window, a serene expression softening her whiskered face. Her tail, which so often twitched with an unspoken demand for attention, lay still, curled neatly around her paws. Her green eyes, usually sharp and inquisitive, now held a deep, unreadable tranquility. The restless energy that had pulsed through her since the arrival of the lynx kit had dissipated, replaced by an acceptance that was as beautiful as it was unexpected. It was as if she, too, understood the necessity of their departure, the natural order of things. She had shared her space, her warmth, her very essence of comfort, and in doing so, had played her part in a miraculous journey of healing. Margaret, watching Daisy, felt a lump form in her throat. The extraordinary bond that had blossomed in their home, between a domestic cat and a wild lynx, was a testament to the universal power of love and compassion. It defied logic, shattered preconceived notions, and opened their hearts to a truth far grander than they had ever imagined. This wasn't just about rescuing an animal. It was about witnessing the raw, untamed spirit of life finding its way back to wholeness, guided by an invisible thread of connection. For the lynx mother, the initial encounter with these strange, upright giants had been a terrifying blur of sound and sensation. The crushing pain in her leg, a searing agony from the trap, had dulled her senses, but not her primal fear. The jostling, the metallic tang of the strange enclosure they had placed her in, a cage she knew from instinct, had sent jolts of panic through her already traumatized body. She'd snarled, a desperate hoarse sound, when a giant hand had reached in, its touch a new kind of fear. Then came the sharp sting, a brief, surprising jab, followed by a warm wave of disorientation. The giants had been loud, their voices rumbling, but not aggressive. There had been a sudden rush of fresh air, a different kind of enclosure, softer, with a faint, clean smell. Water, cool and clean, had been offered, a gentle lapping sound as she drank, the parched dryness in her throat slowly easing. The small white giant, the one called Daisy, had been an enigma, a soft, purring presence that shared the warmth of a large, fleecy blanket. The lynx kit, too young to understand the true danger, had been drawn to the warmth, the rhythmic purr, a lullaby against the fear. The memory of the trap, the hunger, the constant threat, slowly receded, replaced by the strange, unexpected comfort of these gentle giants. For the kit, the world had been a kaleidoscope of confusing smells and sudden movements. The cold of the ground, the rough texture of its mother's fur, then the jarring movement, the strange echoing sounds. Fear had been a constant companion, a tight knot in its tiny belly. But then there was warmth, a consistent, enveloping warmth that wasn't its mother's, a gentle pulsing sound, a low rumble accompanied by a soft, rhythmic stroking, a new smell, clean and comforting, mingled with its mother's familiar scent. Food, soft and easily swallowed, had appeared as if by magic, presented by a giant hand that no longer seemed threatening, but rather a source of life-sustaining sustenance. The fear, for the first time in its young life, had begun to loosen its grip. The pain of hunger, the ache of cold, replaced by the steady thrum of contentment. The giants, initially towering and intimidating, slowly transformed into providers, their hands gentle, their voices soothing murmurs. The time spent within the walls of the cabin was a period of profound healing for both the lynxes. The mother's injured leg mended, slowly at first, then with increasing strength. The kit, once so fragile, grew sturdier, its movements more confident. They learned to trust the rhythmic patterns of the giants' lives, the soft footsteps, the quiet murmurs, the consistent provision of food and water. They saw the giant called Daisy not as a rival, but as a strange, purring sentinel, a source of unwavering, unasked-for comfort. The event, this quiet miracle of interspecies compassion, left an indelible mark on their lives, changing their perception of the wild forever. It wasn't just a place of danger and survival, but also a realm of profound connection, where a rescue could bridge the chasm between species and rehabilitation. It could mend not just bodies, but spirits. Did a wild heart truly understand, or was it something even more profound? A language whispered on the wind and felt in the marrow. Years later, the Carters occasionally spot a lynx family, strong and healthy, in the distance. They wonder if it's their kit, now grown, thriving in its natural habitat. The experience remains a cherished, mysterious memory, a story they tell with reverence, often over mugs of steaming coffee as the sun dips below the western pines. The lingering question isn't just about the act of rescue, but about the profound, unspoken wisdom of nature and the deep, invisible threads that connect all living beings, challenging the very limits of human understanding. The first sensations were a jumble of wrongness, a sharp, searing pain in the leg, a throbbing pulse that echoed the frantic beat of a tiny, terrified heart. Then came the cold, hard ground, the unfamiliar smell of unfamiliar scents, metal, something acrid and stinging the nostrils, and above all, the overwhelming smell of human. The world was a blur of towering shapes, loud noises, and the terrifying sensation of being lifted, jostled, then confined. The small, matted form of the kit, Daisy, had pressed herself into the furthest corner of the carrier, every muscle coiled, every instinct screaming danger. Her fur, thick and mottled brown, was sticky in places with drying blood, and a fresh, jagged tear marred her right ear. The frantic scratching at the metal bars was futile, each claw scrape a testament to her desperation. Then came the needle, a sudden, sharp sting, quickly followed by a strange, heavy lethargy. The panic didn't cease, but it dulled, muted by a growing fuzziness around the edges of her awareness. She remembered the warmth of soft blankets, a gentle hand stroking her head, a touch that at first sparked a fresh wave of fear, but then, surprisingly, began to soothe. The deep thrum of a human voice, low and murmuring, was a constant backdrop, a sound that gradually became associated with a strange, burgeoning sense of safety. The pain in her leg, once a blinding fire, receded to a dull ache, then to a mere memory. It was replaced by a different kind of sensation, the smooth, cool feel of bandages, the subtle warmth radiating from them, a promise of healing. The thirst, which had been a gnawing agony for days, finally found relief. A shallow bowl appeared, filled with clear, cool water. The first lapping sips were tentative, distrustful, but the relief was immediate, washing through her parched throat. Food followed, small, shredded pieces of meat, a scent that ignited a primal hunger she hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Each mouthful was savored, a tangible sign of sustenance, a bridge from the starvation of the wild to the unexpected bounty of this strange, new world. The humans, once terrifying giants, slowly transformed into providers. Their movements, initially jarring, became predictable, their presence associated with comfort, warmth, and the cessation of pain. Daisy learned to trust. It wasn't a conscious decision, not in the human sense, but a gradual, instinctive shift. The sting of past abuses, the memory of her mother's frantic struggle against a different kind of human, slowly faded into the background, replaced by the steady rhythm of healing, the soothing routine of care. She watched Daisy, the human, with a growing curiosity, a softening of her usually vigilant gaze. The human Daisy spoke to her, not with words she understood, but with a cadence that promised no harm. She felt the subtle vibrations of her kindness, the gentle energy that flowed from her touch. This was not the same world she had known, a world of sharp edges and constant danger. This was a place of soft landings, of full bellies, of healing bones. Then came the day of release. The smells, the sounds, the sheer vastness of the forest rushed back with an exhilarating intensity. The familiar tang of pine, the damp earth beneath her paws, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird. It was home. The humans, now smaller in the grand expanse of the wilderness, watched from a distance, a silent farewell, a final unspoken acknowledgement of the deep, invisible bond that had formed. Daisy the lynx kit, now a young, strong lynx, paused at the edge of the tree line, a fleeting glance back at the giants who had given her a second chance. There was no conscious thought of gratitude, no analytical understanding of their intervention. But there was a deep, primal knowing, a cellular memory of gentle hands and full bellies, a foundational sense of well-being that would carry her forward. She slipped into the undergrowth, a shadow returning to the shadows, carrying with her not just a healed body, but a spirit that, through the crucible of fear and trust, had been profoundly, inexplicably touched. If this video touched your heart, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop a simple comment. Maybe type 1 if you'd welcome more story like this, or 0 if you just want to say you were here, or sharing your thoughts about the video. We'll see you on the next video.